Okay, I want to talk to you guys about, I think mentioned it before, but I'm going to focus on Dr. Daggett because he's a white supremacist, and he's been making some very um, controversial statements, which obviously I don't agree with. But I see a severe problem in how he judges evidence. For instance, Dr. Daggett fails to explain why blacks dominate basketball and why this is not a genetic component, especially when blacks are like 90% of the league. Dr. Daggett explains this by using sociological factors, saying that blacks are poor, and blacks are poor, so therefore they use this to supersede in the modern society. Adding the so-called fact that blacks are intellectually inferior, so basketball, football, I think those two sports, and track are the only avenues in general that they can excel in, while whites having a mental capacity, a stronger mental capacity, would rather not play those type of sports and use their mind. What Dr. Daggett fails to realize is that there's a lot of white people in America. I mean, there's a lot of poor white people in America. And as a matter of fact, even if let's say that we match IQ to crime, like the lower IQ people are more prone to crime, and obviously blacks disproportionately have a lower IQ, and they disproportionately represent the prison system. But yet, in the prison system, which is reflective of IQ, so-called low IQ, whites make up the majority of criminals. They at least make up 50% of the criminals or 51% of the criminals in the prison population. But yet, we see still a vast overrepresentation of blacks in basketball, which is 90%. Logically, if we assume Dr. Daggett's theory is correct, whites should make up at least 50% of the NBA, and they don't. I'd also like to add that many black basketball players, I can't say for all black basketball players, but many black basketball players come from middle-class backgrounds. Michael Jordan was not an inner-city poor black person. He was a middle-class black person who lived in a predominantly white community. So, even in socioeconomic class, we see that blacks disproportionately overrepresent the stars. I mean, I would go to if there was a black kid. It's kind of funny when I was in Spencerport, New York. Probably said too much. But when I was in Western New York, from my experience, the black kids most likely were decent or pretty much stars on the basketball team. Now, we can't just say that blacks simply have. I mean, speed and quickness is judged in basketball. Quickness is judged in basketball, and Rustam, the race realist, says that those type of traits favor blacks. But those are only a couple areas. I mean, how about the mental aspect? Larry Bird is a very cerebral basketball player, and many of the white classic players in the NBA back in the 60s were very cerebral players. Yes, maybe if you assume that theory, that domination should exist, but Felipe Rustam is not Dr. Daggett, and Dr. Daggett says, without a doubt, that except for sprinting, blacks are inferior in every single sport. But it's very apparent that in the United States that blacks overrepresent 100 or like 90%, and even if we take the sociological reasons, which I think is a double standard for Dr. Daggett, even if we take the sociological reasons, blacks still overrepresent twice as much. Now let's go to I think Dr. Kovadagath is committing a double standard. Dr. Kovadagath uses facts, global facts, where blacks are on the bottom rung, so-called bottom rung of every major statistic, and says that that's a proof of their genetic inferiority. Yet in the United States, where we could show 12% of the population overrepresents in the sport of basketball, 90%, he claims that's sociological factors. I would like to see these sociological factors. Where's the proof that this is a sociological factors? I think this is Dr. Kovadagath simply trying to explain away this type of domination. Now, I do want to mention that I do not believe in black supremacy or black physical supremacy in any sport. And as a matter of fact, I don't. I was going to say something else. But, Dr. Kovadagath, again, using double standards. It's okay to explain sociological reasons in basketball, blacks dominating basketball, but it's not okay to explain sociological reasons why whites dominate in science. I don't understand that. We could also add, interpolitical crime. And no, it's not an Afro-bozo. This is just established by white historians that it's irrefutable that whites have enslaved whites, enslaved blacks, enslaved Indians for the last 600 years. Over the last 600 years, whites have had a disproportionate impact. Yes, there are some exceptions. The Japanese have committed atrocities too, to be fair. Probably some Middle Eastern countries committed atrocities, but on a global scale, for the last 600 years, European countries, and I'm not going to speak the Western European countries more specifically, have been guilty of colonialism, not just colonizing European countries, colonizing African countries, trying to colonize Asian countries. They haven't really done a great job colonizing Asian countries, especially China and Japan. They didn't even touch Japan. But we see that type of domination. We see that whites clearly freak out, not all whites, but disproportionate amount of whites freak out when they see minorities. The 10% minority population, we see whites having white power, making these claims that, minorities are going to take over their continent. I don't see it. I don't see 50% minorities in their country. I don't even see 20%. It's probably like 5% non-black, non-whites in Europe. Yet there's a big problem of protecting genetic survival. Why is this? Is it because there's a genetic evolutionary pattern toward whites? Is it this theory that this anti-racist came up with to protect? They're afraid of white genetic annihilation. I mean, if you're going to say that the black intellectual underachievement is related to evolutionary theory based upon global patterns, then we have to say that the patterns of what things whites have committed in terms of a culture, a nation historically, I'm not saying it at present time, would have to, would have to be evolutionary theory as well. Unfortunately, many white nationalists are just denying this, that this never happened, or other nations have done it the exact same thing. As a matter of fact, other nations have done it worse, and that people are just trying to make whites look bad. Well, that's just like saying that the same thing with the Afro-bozos, when you're talking about so-called Afro-bozos, when they claim that the claims of interracial crime, black on white crime statistics, and IQ are just a conspiracy by evil whitey to make black people look bad. It just seems to me that both sides just can't deal with the truth. To me, they're talking about other white people, every time you talk about blacks disproportionately represented in crime, I'll continue later on. I'm about to run out of time, so hold on.